The wind howled across the open fields, whipping the tall stalks of corn until they bent like they might snap. Dark clouds rolled over the horizon, swallowing what little sunlight remained that evening. The smell of rain hung heavy in the air as Ethan Carter guided his old pickup truck into the driveway, the back loaded with the last of the hay bales. He barely had time to get them into the barn before the storm broke. Rain slammed against the tin roof, the sound echoing like 1,000 drumming hands. Ethan worked quickly, stacking the bales in the corner, his mind already on the warm stew simmering back at the farmhouse. But as he reached for the barn door to secure it against the wind, something caught his eye. Through the sheets of rain, a figure was moving slowly up the dirt path from the main road. At first, he thought it might be one of the neighbors, but as the shadow drew closer, he realized it was a woman, completely drenched, stumbling with every step. Her thin floral dress clung to her like a second skin, plastered against her trembling frame. Her hair, whatever color it had been, was now a tangled mess plastered to her cheeks. Ethan's gut twisted. She wasn't dressed for this kind of weather, and judging by the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, she wasn't just caught in the rain. She was running from something. Without a second thought, he flung the barn doors wide. "Over here," he called over the roar of the wind. She hesitated for a moment, eyes narrowing as if she wasn't sure she could trust him. Then another gust of wind sent her staggering, and she made her way toward him, her boots squelching in the mud. By the time she stepped inside, her teeth were chattering so hard he could hear them over the rain. Ethan grabbed an old wool blanket from a hook on the wall and draped it over her shoulders. "You're soaked to the bone. Here, sit down." He guided her to an overturned crate. "What on earth are you doing out in weather like this?" "Thank you," she whispered, ignoring his question. Her voice was soft, hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken in hours. She huddled into the blanket, clutching it tightly with pale fingers. "I'm Ethan," he said, trying again. "You from around here?" She shook her head quickly. "No, just passing through." She hesitated, before adding, "My name's Clara." There was something in the way she said it, like she was trying it on for size, or maybe leaving something unsaid. He could have pressed for more, but something told him now wasn't the time. Instead, he busied himself pouring her a cup of hot coffee from the thermos he kept in the barn during long work days. She accepted it with both hands, sipping carefully, her eyes darting toward the barn doors every time the wind rattled them. Lightning flashed, followed by the low rumble of thunder. Clara flinched. Ethan noticed how tightly she gripped the mug, her knuckles white. This wasn't just fear of the storm, it was fear of being found. "You can stay here until it passes," he said gently. "The farmhouse is just a short walk from here, but we can wait until it's a little calmer." She nodded, clearly relieved. But she didn't relax. Her eyes stayed fixed on the rain-soaked road, as though expecting a figure to emerge from the shadows at any moment. Ethan didn't know who she was or what she was running from, but he did know one thing. People didn't end up on a backroad farm in the middle of a storm by accident, and something told him this wasn't the last time the sound of footsteps in the rain would bring trouble to his quiet life. The first morning after the storm, Clara woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and the faint smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The small guest room was cozy, but unfamiliar sunlight spilling through lace curtains, a handmade quilt draped over her legs. She remembered the storm, the barn, Ethan's steady voice. For the first time in days, she felt warmth in her bones. When she stepped into the kitchen, Ethan was already there, leaning over the stove in a flannel shirt, with the sleeves rolled up. "Morning," he said without turning. "Hope you like eggs."
"I do,"
she replied softly. Her voice was still hesitant, like every word had to be measured before leaving her lips. That morning, she ate more than she expected. Fluffy scrambled eggs, thick slices of toast, and fresh milk. Ethan didn't press her with questions, but she caught him studying her a few times, as if trying to figure out the pieces of a puzzle. After breakfast, she offered to help with the day's chores. "You don't have to," he told her, but she insisted, and so began the strange rhythm of her days on the farm. She learned to feed the chickens, scattering grain while they clucked and jostled around her boots. She followed Ethan to the vegetable garden, planting neat rows of beans and tomatoes, her hands quickly becoming rough with soil. He taught her how to guide the old tractor through the fields, and though she laughed the first time it sputtered and stalled, he noticed her smile lingered longer than before. Life on the farm was quiet, but full. Mornings began with the sun stretching over the hills. Evenings ended with the sound of crickets and the distant bark of coyotes. For Clara, it was a different world from the one she had left behind, a world of constant noise, polished surfaces and calculated appearances. Yet despite the peace, there was a shadow in her eyes that never fully lifted. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in gold, Ethan found her sitting on the farmhouse porch. She was staring at the horizon, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You've been quiet all day," he said, settling into the chair beside her. She hesitated before answering. "It's nothing. Doesn't look like nothing." She glanced at him then, her expression guarded. "Sometimes I forget where I am, and then I remember why I had to leave." Ethan didn't push. He simply nodded and let the silence stretch between them. He knew a thing or two about the weight people carried, about the kind of pain that didn't like to be prodded. But Clara didn't know that Ethan had his own ghosts. Years ago, he had been in love once, a woman from the city who promised she could handle the quiet life. But when a wealthier man came along, she'd left without a word. It had been the last time Ethan let himself trust too easily. That was why he kept his heart guarded. Even now, even as he began to notice how the light in Clara's eyes caught the morning sun, or how her laughter seemed to soften the air around them, the two of them fell into a kind of unspoken companionship. They worked side by side in the fields, shared meals at the old wooden table, and sometimes walked the fence lines at dusk without saying a word. But every now and then, Ethan would catch her gaze drifting toward the distant road, as if she expected a car to appear and take her away. And though he didn't know her full story yet, he had the strange, certain feeling that the day was coming when her past would come knocking. And when it did, he wasn't sure if he'd be ready to let her go. The days rolled by in a steady rhythm, and spring slowly gave way to early summer. The fields turned greener, the air warmer, and the smell of freshly cut grass lingered everywhere. On the surface, life on the Carter farm seemed perfect. Quiet mornings, honest work, and peaceful nights. But beneath that calm, there was a current neither Ethan nor Clara could ignore. Clara still flinched at sudden noises. Sometimes, when the phone rang unexpectedly, her hands would tighten around whatever she was holding, and she'd glance at Ethan like she was waiting for him to say it was bad news. One evening, they were fixing the old fence along the western pasture. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and orange. As the sun began to set, Clara was kneeling in the grass, handing Ethan nails, when she froze mid-reach. "What is it?" he asked, following her gaze. Far down the dirt road, a black sedan was slowly approaching. It wasn't a neighbor. Ethan knew everyone's vehicles for miles around. Something about the way it crawled along the road made his gut tighten. The car didn't stop. It passed by the turn to his driveway and disappeared beyond the bend. But Clara didn't take her eyes off it until it was gone. "Friend of yours?" Ethan asked lightly, though he was watching her closely. Her voice was faint. "No, not a friend." She didn't elaborate, and Ethan didn't press her. Not then. But later that night, after she had gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, replaying the look on her face. It wasn't just surprise, it was fear. The next morning, Clara was back to her usual routine, feeding the hens and tending the garden. But Ethan noticed her glance toward the road more often now, as if she expected that black sedan to reappear at any moment. A few days later, they went into town together for supplies. Clara wore a simple cotton dress and a straw hat, blending in with the other townsfolk. They stopped at the feed store, the general store, and finally the little cafe on Main Street for coffee. Everything seemed normal, until Ethan noticed Clara stiffen near the window. Two men in sharp suits had parked across the street. They weren't talking to anyone, just standing there, scanning the sidewalk. like they were looking for someone. One of them pulled out his phone, his gaze sweeping toward the cafe. Ethan leaned closer. "You know them?" Clara swallowed hard. "I might." Her voice cracked. "Ethan, we should go." He didn't ask questions this time. He just paid the bill and walked her out the back door, taking the long way around to the truck. They drove home in silence, the hum of the tires on the road, the only sound between them. When they reached the farmhouse, Ethan turned off the engine, but didn't move to get out. "Clara," he said quietly, "whatever this is, you don't have to go through it alone." She shook her head. "You don't understand. If I tell you, I put you in danger too." "Maybe," he said, meeting her eyes. "But keeping it from me won't make it go away." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she looked away, blinking fast, like she was holding back tears. "I promise I'll tell you. Just not yet." Ethan wanted to argue, but the look on her face stopped him. She wasn't ready, and maybe, deep down, he wasn't ready to hear it. But as he watched her step out of the truck and walk toward the porch, the thought struck him like a blow. Whatever her secret was, it was coming closer. And when it arrived, it wouldn't just change her life. It would change his too. 3 nights after the trip to town, the storm came. Not the kind that rattled the barn roof and soaked the fields. This one was the quiet kind, the one that crept in without thunder, bringing a heavy stillness before it broke. Clara had been restless all evening, pacing the porch and glancing toward the road. Ethan pretended to be fixing the hinges on the screen door, but in truth, he was watching her. When the headlights appeared in the distance, both of them froze. This time the black sedan didn't pass by. It turned into the long dirt drive, rolling slowly until it stopped in front of the farmhouse. 2 men stepped out, the same ones Ethan had seen in town. Clara's breath caught. "They found me." Before he could ask anything more, the taller man called out, "Mrs. Whitmore, you've made this much harder than it had to be." Ethan looked sharply at Clara. "Mrs. what?" Her eyes were glassy. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." The men walked closer. One of them pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "Your husband wants you back, Clara. You've caused him enough embarrassment." "Husband?" The word slammed into Ethan like a punch. Clara's voice shook, but she stood straighter. "I'm not going back to him. Tell Nathan that." The man smirked. "That's not your choice. The papers aren't signed. Legally, you're still his wife." Ethan stepped forward, his stance firm. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to." The shorter man took a step toward Ethan, but Clara moved between them. "Ethan, please, don't. They'll make this worse for you." The taller man's tone sharpened. "This is family business. Stay out of it, farmer." But Ethan didn't move. "You're on my land. That makes it my business." For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then Clara turned to Ethan, her voice trembling. "I married Nathan Whitmore 2 years ago. He's wealthy, powerful, but he's also dangerous. When I found out about the things he was doing, illegal things, I told him I wanted to leave. That's when he locked me in our house for weeks. I escaped during a charity event and hid here." Ethan's chest tightened. All those quiet glances toward the road, the flinches at sudden noises, they all made sense now. The taller man stepped forward again. "You're coming with us, Clara." She shook her head. "No." Ethan didn't think. He just acted. "I'll call the sheriff," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. The men exchanged a look. Then, without another word, they turned and walked back to the car. The sedan's headlights lit up the driveway as it reversed, the tires crunching against the gravel until it disappeared into the night. When the taillights vanished, Clara collapsed into the porch chair, her hands shaking. Ethan sat across from her. "You should have told me." Her eyes glistened. "I was afraid you would send me away." He reached across the small table and took her hand, calloused fingers against her trembling ones. "Clara, you're safe here. I don't care what his name is, or how much money he has. He's not taking you back." The silence between them was different now, heavier, but also honest. For the first time since arriving, Clara let herself cry. The days that followed weren't easy. Ethan contacted the sheriff, who confirmed there was an ongoing investigation into Nathan Whitmore's dealings. Clara gave a statement, her voice steady even when her hands weren't. The legal process would be long, but she wasn't running anymore. By midsummer, the fields were high and golden. Clara stood beside Ethan on the porch one evening, watching the sun sink behind the hills. "You never asked me about the secret bride part," she said with a small teasing smile. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Do I want to know? It's what the papers called me," she explained, "because no one knew he'd married me. I was just part of a deal to him. But here, I feel like I'm actually someone." Ethan turned toward her, his gaze steady. "You are someone, and you're not going anywhere, unless you want to." Her eyes softened. "What if I want to stay?" "Then," he said with a quiet smile, "we'll see what we can build together." And for the first time, Clara believed it was possible.